Hello and welcome to Wine Blast. In this episode, we're going to be rocking out to the strains of Portuguese white wines. And if you understandably don't quite know what that means, you'll just have to stay tuned to find out.
I'm not sure I quite know what it means. And I'm the one making this episode with you. So maybe I should stay tuned or just retune or I don't know what. But anyway, suffice it to say, music will be involved. Delicious white wine from Portugal will be involved. And a certain amount of fun will be had.
I hope so.
It's fair to say. Here's a taster of what's coming up.
I'm amazed to see that even in top restaurants, you find Portuguese white wines.
I just think that there is really a very, very big potential of these varieties and local and terroir, what we have over here. If you compare also to Burgundy, we are much more affordable than Burgundy, yeah?
It takes me away to that special place, and if I stare too long, probably break down and cry.
So this is going to take a bit of explaining, but before we do that, those were the words of top-notch Portuguese producers Tiago Mendes and Daniel Niepoort, who we'll be hearing more from a little later in the show.
We've also had a couple of listener questions in. One was from Heikki Rapana. So sorry, Heikki, if I got that wrong. But Heikki is a Finnish wine lover from Brussels who enjoyed our Rias Baixas episodes. This summer, I drank a lot of Portuguese Alvarinhos and concluded they're more floral and a tad more aromatic than their northern Spanish siblings, probably because there is more often Loureiro in the blend. As a follow-up or spin-off to your Rias Baixas episodes, it would be interesting to listen to your views on the Portuguese Alvarinho, i.e. Alvarinho, from the other side of the Minho River.
And then we had a speak pipe message from Jenna, which went as follows.
I was wondering if you ever had an episode about Vinho Verde, but we just got a orange wine that's a Vinho Verde at the restaurant I work at, and I was trying to send one of your podcasts to my fellow servers about Vinho Verde and just a little bit more about it. I know it's like a blend of a bunch of different grapes, but we were just curious about what the whole process is and which grapes and all of that. And yeah, it's fun. It's my first orange Vinho Verde wine. Super exciting. So I'd love to get a little bit more info. Thank you.
So there's obviously interest in Portuguese whites out there. And then clearly fate was decreeing this was a subject we were going to have to dive into because we were asked to host a masterclass in Lisbon featuring some of Portugal's very finest white wines. And I think it's fair to say that we were blown away by the wines we encountered while doing that.
We were lucky. We were lucky enough to feature some absolutely stunning wines. And we'll get onto that in a moment. Yeah. What wasn't maybe quite so stunning was the musical performance we put on at the same event. So this was Vinho da Casa, a fantastic annual event in Portugal featuring Portugal's very best wine producers in a house over a weekend together with music, masterclasses, Michelin-starred food, that kind of thing. Yeah. And for some reason, they asked us to do a music set, didn't they?
They did. I don't know what they were thinking. Maybe they had a bit too much Madeira.
I'll never do that again, will I?
Yeah, anyway, it was a bit of fun. And, we build our performance as much sort of as comedy, really, as music. Really just an excuse for a sing-along. And seeing as we're in the business of regularly oversharing on this podcast, here's a mega mix sample of what went down. Just to be clear, it's only 54 seconds for you to endure or, skip through. It's basically stuff recorded on people's phones, hence the dodgy sound quality and slightly off-key background singing, I think we can say. So yeah, you can picture the raucous audience involvement, dancing and general carousing and merriment.
It takes me away to that special place, and if I stare too long, probably break down and cry. I'm still standing, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm still standing, yeah, yeah, yeah. Look at everything that's come and gone. Sometimes when I play that old sixth string, think about you, wonder what went wrong. And now my life is changing oh so many ways. My independence into vanish in the haze. Take on me, take me on.
So that's what happens when you have one too many Portuguese white wines. Be warned.
Oh, my word. They did actually have some proper musicians playing after us, didn't they? So
Thank
people
goodness they went after.
Exactly. They weren't too scarred after. They sort of had a chance to recover. Though I have to say, I'm not sure anyone will have recovered from the rendition of Happy Birthday that I completely comprehensively butchered on the guitar. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Shall we set the scene briefly for what we're supposed to be talking about?
Absolutely. So we covered Portuguese still wines not too long ago, but a lot of that was focused on the reds. And I think there's a general perception that when we're talking about Portuguese wine beyond port and Madeira, it is all about the reds. But actually, what we've been discovering lately is that Portuguese white wines, which often sail under the radar, can be just as delicious and maybe even more exciting right now.
Yeah, and they're getting better and ever more exciting by the vintage. I was just talking to American sommelier Micah Clark of Raffles in Boston about this, and he said that Portuguese whites had for long, seemed to be an afterthought or relatively basic stuff, but now they're being totally reinvented in his view, and these days they are, in his words, compelling.
Now, let's be fair, white wine only represents about a third of Portugal's total production. But a long Atlantic coast, plus a host of intriguing indigenous grape varieties, including a lot of field blends and historic styles, they make for a diverse and intriguing white wine scene. Most of us have heard of Vinho Verde, the so-called green wine grown in the north of the country, often not far from the Spanish border and famous for its spritzy tang and low alcohol. But these days there are intriguing whites made all over the country in all kinds of styles.
Yeah, for example, there were two wines, weren't there, that absolutely floored us. Yeah, when we were doing our prep for this masterclass.
Really did, yeah.
So firstly, we had Luis Pato's Viñas Velhas Branco 1990 from Bairrada, a blend of Pical, Maria Gomes, Cercial and Cercialinho. I told you these grapes were different. Pure liquid toasted nuts, honey, woolly, flinty, truffle. I just wrote one word. I wrote heaven.
It was.
In a wine.
It was.
And then there was the Gloria Reynolds Art and Tradition White 2007 from the Alentejo, made from barrel-aged Antau Vaz, really deep amber in colour, and with sort of mesmerising flavours of roasted peaches, toasted nuts, spicy, intense, savoury, sort of quite sherry-like in a way. Insanely good with Conte cheese, utterly gorgeous wines.
They were amazing. And we were also impressed, actually, by the wines of Anselmo Mendes, a superstar grower in Vinho Verde, who started his own project out of his garage. And he's renowned for doing weird and wonderful things, like aging his Vinho Verde wines in oak and making orange styles way before other people considered these things were even feasible, let alone wise.
Yeah, so this, combined with the Vinho Verde themes of our listener questions, prompted us to chat with Anselmo's son, Tiago, who speaks way better English than his dad, it's fair to say. I know, Anselmo would recognise that too. Now, Tiago said that white wine production was definitely an increasing focus in Portugal as wine drinkers were looking ever more for lighter, fresher styles of wine.
Yeah, now Tiago's dad, Anselmo, has been dubbed Mr. Alvarinho, but of course there are other grape varieties in the Vinho Verde region, like the up-and-coming Loureiro and Avesso. So I asked Tiago whether he thought the future for Vinho Verde was in single varietal wines or in blended wines.
I would say the single varietals. Traditionally, the blends, you find it mostly on the entry-level wines. For example, we do an entry-level with Alvarinho, Loureiro, and Avesso, which are for us the three main white grape varieties of the region. But definitely in the single varietals, I believe that the future of the Vinho Verde will be the discovery of the other grape varieties. So mainly the markets always look for the Alvarinho. I think the Alvarinho is very well consolidated, is very renowned, but I think people are now discovering grapes such as Loureiro, Avesso, and so I believe that is the future, is to show the diversity of these grapes.
And tell me about Loureiro. It's less well known, as you say, than Alvarinho. What does it bring to Portugal's white wine offering?
Oh, for me, Loureiro is my favorite grape. I have actually done a Loureiro back in 2019, it was kind of a challenge. I told my father, people always talk about the Alvarinho. Why don't we shift the focus and start to highlight the Loureiro as the next star of the region? I really believe that it's a grape with tremendous quality. The problem was that in the past, the focus was mainly on quantity and not so much in the quality. It's actually the most planted grape inside of the Vinho Verde, but it was traditionally used for entry-level wines, often blended with other grapes, and the focus wasn't really much in the quality. And if you look now, I think the quality of the Loureiros is quite high. I believe that is a wine that really suits the palate for today's trends, because it's really quite an aromatic grape. You get a lot of citric aromas, floral notes, and really has this vibrant and fresh acidity. Also due to the proximity to the Atlantic Ocean, it really brings out this freshness in the wines, which is something that people are looking for. And so I really believe it's the next star of the Vinho Verde region.
Yeah, how strong is terroir expression in Vinho Verde? And if it is noticeable, what are the key sub-regions or terroirs that we should know about?
Well, number one, definitely Monção e Melgaço, which is the sub-region where which is like for the heart and soul of the Alvarinho wines. This is a region or sub-region in this case that has really had a different path from the rest of the Vinho Verde region throughout the years. Even today, we have our own seal, so Vinho Verde, Monção e Melgaço in our own wines, because really this is where, let's say, the majority of the premium producers are located at, and where you can find a lot of single vineyard Alvarinhos in different styles. But definitely the level of quality is quite high there. But also another sub-region that is in the spotlight is the Lima sub-region, where we can find the Loureiro wines, which is closer to the Atlantic Ocean. This is definitely a region that has been seen an increase in quality throughout the years. And yes, once again, we really love the Loureiro grapes, and we really believe it's the next star of the region. Another sub-region would be the Baião sub-region, which is where the Avesso comes from. This is right in the border with the Douro region. It's actually in the Douro Valley. So if you visit this region, you will see that it's very similar to the Douro, but we are still in the Vinho Verde region. And although the Avesso is still well known, we have seen a consistent growth throughout the years. It really produce outstanding wines with a mineral character, gastronomic wines that are very well structured, and we really love them. Unfortunately, they are not so known, but I think that in a few years, it will be on the spotlight as well.
And just on that note, would you say that Portuguese whites can compete internationally? Why should people look to buy a Portuguese white rather than something else?
Well, Portugal is still well known for the money for value. So you kind of have these wines that have a lot of quality for a good price. This is very good because that makes us very competitive. Although we still believe that we need to value our wines and we need to start rising the prices. I believe that we have this amazing Atlantic coast, which really allows us to produce these refreshing white wines. We have a huge diversity of grapes. We were just talking about Alvarinho, Loureiro, and Avesso inside of the Vinho Verde. But obviously, if you go to the Douro, Alentejo, down, you have grapes such as the Encruzado, Viozinho, Arinto, which are amazing grapes.
And do you think that's important to sort of highlight the fact that you've got all these indigenous varieties, which you don't find in other markets around the world, as a point of differentiation?
Yes, definitely. I think that also one of the trends of consumption today is people are more willing to try new things, and they want to try new grapes. They just don't want to just drink the Chardonnay, the Sauvignon. They want to go for different grape varieties, unique grape varieties where they can find it anywhere else. And fortunately, Portugal definitely has a huge variety of grape varieties, and that really make it a unique country in that sense.
I have to ask you, I think you make an orange wine, don't you? Tell me about that.
Yes, we do. Well, after the experiment that my father had done with the barrels in 1998, In 2001, he did his second experiment, which was the curtimenta. So curtimenta in Portuguese basically is the fermentation with the skins. So he did his first orange wine. So he made the Alvarinho fermented with the skins. And at the time, my father had this main distributor was based in Lisbon, in the capital. And he sold one pallet to this distributor. Within a week, this distributor returned the pallet to the winery saying, the wine is completely ruined. The wine is orange. It's oxidized. Nobody likes the wine. And so my father was shocked. He was saying, no, but this is a wine made with fermentation with skins. This is an experiment I've done. And he said, Anselmo, nobody likes the wine. And so my father started to shorten down the period with the skins. So today, this wine called curtimenta only spends 24 hours with the skins. But lately, we have launched a new wine called Tempo, which is made with the full fermentation with the skins. So Tempo means time. My father always says that time is the most important factor in the wine industry. And if we look back at the time, my father, I think, was quite ahead of his time. So one of the trends today, people love orange wine. Everybody looks for orange wine. So my father kind of gets upset when someone goes doing a tasting and says, oh, you are also making orange wine. And he always replies like, I was doing orange wine before it was cool and trendy. So
he was definitely ahead of the curve, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say, Tiago, is the future for Portuguese whites?
From what I've been talking to many producers in Portugal, definitely white wine is the focus. They have seen the growing consumption. Even with climate change, there have been, some regions have been shifting towards the focus towards white wines. I believe that the future for white wines of Portugal is continuing to highlight our grapes, the diversity of our grapes, improving the quality, and definitely the communication and promotion of these wines internationally. So I have the opportunity and the privilege to travel a lot to, markets like the US, UK, Germany. And I'm amazed to see that even in top restaurants, you find Portuguese white wines today. And so, once again, it's not just the money for value, but also I believe that we're starting to position ourselves also as a premium in the premium category as well.
Tiago, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susie.
So, Loureiro as his big tip for the future of Vinho Verde, alongside Alvarinho, I guess, which is going great guns both in Portugal and Spain. Is a wine majoring on freshness combined with structure and intensity. And I guess this picks up on our listener question from Heike, doesn't it? To put this question to you, how would you sum up our views on Portuguese Alvarinho? And I guess Loureiro too in the mix.
Yeah, well, I think they're both really exciting. In the same way that the Rias Baixas wines are really pushing the boundaries for fine white, so are Portuguese Alvarinhos and Loureiros. I think it's hard to maybe differentiate the two sometimes in quality terms, but I do think Loureiro and Avesso have great potential in Portugal. They can have lovely aromatics and structure, a real freshness too, really good matches for seafood, totally. And increasingly, as we said, sort of diverse in style. So, yeah, I'd say exciting.
Yeah, I remember going out there a few years ago and being impressed by, how this amazing sort of historic region was being revived and reinvented with kind of serious, age-worthy, structured wines, not just the sort of simple, basic fare of the past. And we've even got the orange wines too, which picks up on Jenna's point, the kind of wine that's also ideal with food. So hopefully it went down well in the restaurant, Jenna.
Okay, so coming up, we hear from Daniel Niepoort, a producer of glittering repute, and we recommend some rather exciting Portuguese whites from right across the price spectrum. By way of summary so far, Portuguese whites are having a moment, emerging from the shadow of the fortifieds and reds as serious fine wines offering great value and character, often a bit of experimental fun too. Exploring and discovering them can involve a lot of joy. It can even inspire music?
Yeah, well, I won't start singing, just to reassure you. At least not yet. Give me time. Anyway,
We're all happy about that.
We've explored the wines of the north, but then we wanted to turn our attention to more central and southern parts of Portugal, like the Douro, Bairrada and Alentejo. And one winery that makes innovative, intriguing and very often utterly delicious wines from all these places is Niepoort.
So, after much trying, we finally managed to pin down Daniel Niepoort, a busy man given he's a new father and with no shortage of wine business on his plate. We found him wandering in a vineyard in the Douro region in the company of a dog and a donkey. Sounds a bit like a children's fairy tale. Anyway, I asked him what is exciting about Portuguese whites right now.
Well, I don't know if only for white, but also for white. It's just like Portugal has so many different strange varieties. Where often when people often ask me, what grapes are in this white wine, and then often I like to give the answer, well, I don't know. And then they look at me, why? How can you not know? And I'm like, well, because it doesn't really matter, we have often field blends where it's mixed varieties, and I really kind of like this idea of field blends. And I mean, white wine, it's great, and in a way we see that more and more people are actually looking for white wine. I don't know why, if it's only in Portugal, but in general.
And do you feel that this, the fact you have all these indigenous varieties is your kind of USP as a country?
I think it should be, yes. Nothing against other international varieties. They are great, but I think we should show what we have, And as Portugal was kind of always forgotten a little bit, actually a lot of people kind of come to me and like, oh, you also make white wine in Portugal? I thought there is only red wine and maybe Vinho Verde, but yeah. So I think it's definitely something what we should show the people and explain to people, even when sometimes it's a bit more difficult because people are used to ask for a Chardonnay or a Riesling.
Now, Kosh is one of our favourite wines of yours. It's an old vine field blend. How do you go about making that particular wine?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, and actually a lot of people really ask what's the secret about Kosh, and to be honest, there is not really a secret. We try. There's always a few very old vineyards, so it's never only one vineyard. And then of course, for these vineyards, we and Luis put extra attention to pick in the perfect moment, whatever that means. And then we select the best barrels, and it's just like a good mix. We have these components of the nice reduction, the flintiness, what we like. Then we have some barrels, they are quite neutral, but they give you a very good mid palate. And then some they are for the freshness, some are more for the body. We don't really work with batonnage. We think Douro, you cannot really hide that you are in Douro, and you shouldn't. It's still, you make a fresh wine, but there is always the sun somewhere.
Now, tell us about the Douro region and the Encruzado grape. What's the secret to getting the best out of that particular variety?
So I'm exactly here in Down.
I can see. I've got to describe to everybody. I'm watching you walk around a vineyard, aren't I, as we talk.
Yeah. Well, actually, in Cruzado, I don't know so well, because often the grapes we work here, it's Pical and Novazia and all this kind of stuff. But I think it's a nice grape in Cruzado. We're gonna plant a little bit, but I would say it's not one of the grapes that we only want to focus on, because Down has, I guess, more to offer than only in Cruzado. So here it's a much less of a field blend in Down, but still there is some, and I like that. So I rather also like to focus on that. If you speak about Encruzado and the white wines from the Down, I think the Down region it's really one of the most fantastic regions we have in Portugal. It's just so estimated in a way. And I will never forget we had once a tasting where we opened a white wine from down from 78, and we decanted some Burgundy from 2009 or 11, something like that. Put it in a decanter. We served it blind, and most of the people on the table they thought that the 78 was younger than the 2009, and I just think that there is really a very, very big potential of these varieties and local and terroir what we have over here.
So what have been the most exciting innovations that you've done as a company on the white wine front?
I mean, at the end, we just try to make good white wine. We do work with floor. We always try to do in the Vinho Verde, like, a cabinet, make something like Riesling style. This we definitely do. And in the Vinho Verde, we also try to kind of show how good Loureiro as a grape can be.
Was the first, am I right in thinking the first white still wine that you made was the Rodoma? Is that right?
Yes, my father, yeah, exactly.
And can you describe that to us and how that's evolved over the years?
So the one we recently tasted quite a lot was really this 1996, and for me, one of the most beautiful days in my life was when I worked in Burgundy, and after my harvest and all that, the whole team came to Portugal, and then my father he opened the 3-liter bottles of the Redoma 96, and we served it to all these Burgundy guys, and when you see people from France and especially from Burgundy, and they just like, wow, this is very, very good. And I think that was just like really nice because people don't expect that, from Douro and from Portugal, and it is also quite a new thing. And to be honest, I don't know how it's possible that this wine is so good, huh? Because at the time there was no cellar, there was no cooling, there was no nothing. And I think this is just teaching us that cellar technology it's nice and it's good, but we also have to be very careful that we not overprotect everything. And this is what we in general try to do, be very clean and work well, but not protecting too much, and give time to things,
So going back to your Burgundy guys loving your wine, do you think that Portuguese whites do compete internationally? Why should people look to buy Portuguese white rather than white from somewhere else?
I think Portuguese wines have a lot of personality, and they're very good. And if you want to compare to Burgundy, and when you spoke about Koch, in the beginning it was, let's say, my father tried to do something like a Burgundy Chardonnay without Chardonnay and without Burgundy, but then quite fast it turned into like more than an inspiration. And today we talk about that. It's very nice to actually, you can taste Koch. It's not a copy of Burgundy, even when you can put it in a blind taste next to Burgundy. So I think it's very beautiful that it become kind of this can be Douro, and I think that's also where we're looking for. We try not to mark the wines too much, even if with Koch we work a little bit with new wood, but in general we never want to have just woody wine, And then I think if you compare also to Burgundy, we are much more affordable than Burgundy, yeah?
Isn't everything? So one final question, Daniel. What do you think is the future for Portuguese white wines?
I think we have a very good future because people see that Portuguese white wine exists, first of all. Second of all, people see that Portugal is existing, and a lot of people come to Portugal. And that's really the best way to actually show what's Portugal about. And I just hope that we here in Portugal, we stay Portugal, that we don't let us influence too much from other things. I mean, we can for sure we have to learn a lot, but we still should stick to the roots of Portugal, and I think then we have a very good future. And this for white wine, but also for red and also for port.
Daniel, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
More affordable than Burgundy, and with the roots of Portugal. Now, this reminded me of a comment from Paulo Nunes, who's a top producer in the Douro region, a big fan of historic variety blends, who makes outstanding whites under the Casa de Passarella and Villa Oliveira labels. Now, he said, "I wish people would stop comparing our whites to Burgundy. I think Burgundy should compare its whites to ours."
I love it. But when you taste these really lovely Douro whites, particularly but not exclusively those involving the Encruzado grape, they're often really mineral and savoury, and they age beautifully. So you can see why people make the comparisons, can't you?
Yeah, you can. And in the context of Burgundy, you discussed Niepoort's Koch wine with Daniel. Now, we should explain that this is a hugely complex, if you haven't tried it before, flinty, nutty, savoury white they make from a field blend in the Douro. It's far from cheap, in fact quite the opposite, but it's stunning if you get a chance to try it. The 2020 was looking superb recently.
Good point. And on that note, actually, to pick up on a couple of other things we referenced in passing, Niepoort also makes an off-dry Loureiro in the Vinho Verde in what they describe as a sort of a cabinet style, so like an off-dry German Riesling. Now, that's really nice. They have whites aged under floor, so in the style of sherry. They also do a cross-regional blend called Doda from the Douro and Dow. In fact, it's pretty amazing, the range of stuff they do. Checking out the wines on their website it's a bit like rubbing a genie's lamp. All sorts of weird and wonderful things seem to pop up.
Indeed. We'll be coming back to Redoma, which Daniel mentioned in a bit, because now we're going to taste and recommend a few wines of the Portuguese white persuasion, aren't we?
We are indeed. I thought you'd never ask. Right. So I've got a couple of decent value options from the Wine Society, who are in the UK, and the first is the Natural Mystic Vinho Verde 2023, which is fresh and zesty, though it's not spritzy. It's relatively simple, but decent value, just over a tenner. So it's based on Loureiro with a splash of Alvarinho.
So touching on that Loureiro
theme it's decent, isn't it?
Yeah,
Nicely
nice,
packaged.
simple, fresh.
And then we've got here the Fonte de Ouro Branco 2023 from Dow. This is made with the Encruzado and Arinto grapes. It has kind of piercing aromas of fennel and white currant, and you've got some apricot kernel in there. And then the palate is bright, it's zesty, it's stony, it's a bit saline. It's kind of I suppose a bit like a really good Alvarinho or Pickpool, with a little bit of Chablis stoniness. It's bold and revitalising. You get a lot of wine there for the price.
Yes.
I mean, again, just I think it's $10.50. So really good wine. Yeah,
I agree. I thought it had sort of shades of Assyrtiko, with a sort of chalky, mineral, tense, tangy, kind of food friendly style.
Yeah.
But there we go, making comparisons. Paulo Nunes will be slapping us on the wrist. So I'll move on. The Quinta da Fonte Soto Branco 2022. This one's made by the Symington family in Porto Alegre, a high altitude quality hotspot in the Alentejo, which is sort of south central Portugal in the east. If that makes any sense. Anyway, it's made from the Arinto and Verdelho grapes. It's gorgeous. Mealy, flinty, toasted nut aromas. Some sort of dried apricot and red apple as well.
It's really good.
And then on palate, it's kind of generous and savoury. It's quite pithy and spicy on the finish. I'm trying really hard not to compare it, but if you were to want alternatives to warm vintage Chablis or Burgundy or sort of white Rioja or even sort of richer Vinho Verde, this is a great option. It's £18.50, but I reckon at this price, it's fantastic value.
Yeah, it's a lovely kind of wintry white, that one, isn't it? As we've already said, there really are some fantastic value whites coming out of Portugal right now. Now, we've got a couple of bonus wines, each from our interviewees. First up is the Mendes and Symington Contacto Alvarinho Vinho Verde 2023. So this is a joint venture between Anselmo and the Symingtons of our previous wine. It's £16 £8, imported by Fells in the UK and also available at the Wine Society and internationally. And it's got a lovely, attractive orange zest fragrance, and then it's pithy and slightly chalky in the mouth with lovely texture and just real rustic charm.
And I've got the Anselmo Mendes Curtimenta Alvarinho Vinho Verde 2012. So a real treat here. This is the wine that Tiago mentioned, skin contact, oak-aged Alvarinho, but 12 years old now. And it's stunning.
It blew us away,
it's
didn't
stunning.
it?
It's
Really
those
did.
captivating, complex aromas of sort of baked cream, fresh bread, blanched nuts, kind of white chocolate. And then the palate is so profound and layered and savoury. If you just knew old school Vinho Verde, this wine would be shocking, wouldn't it? You'd say it couldn't come from the same region.
No, you would
But
never.
I think it's a sign
put
of
the two
what
together.
this region can and is doing. It's majoring on steely fresh core and building complexity and ripeness there as well. They've got wonderful complexity from the skins, from the oak. It's very stylish, very new wave, captivating. And you can get these older styles actually. They are available for sale.
Yeah.
This one's delicious.
So, Heike, I think that gives you a sense of where we stand on these wines. Anyway, on to Daniel's stuff. I've got the Niepoort Conciso Branco 2021 from Douro, which is about £38, and it's brought into the UK by the excellent Halo Wines and in shops like Fortnum's and Caviste. This is a beautiful wine. It's only 11.5% alcohol, which I love because then it majors on having this vibrant lemon acidity at its core. It has gorgeous mealy creamy texture and herbal waxy smoky complexity. You rarely get that sort of level of flavour at that level of alcohol, if you know what I mean. And it's a blend of Bical, Malvasia and Encruzado. It is brilliant with food. We know this. We had it with smoked haddock and lovely creamy curried lentils, and it was spot on, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I've got a wine that Daniel mentioned, the Niepoort Redoma Reserva Branco 2023 from Douro, another region making very exciting whites right now. And he told the story about the Burgundians, and you can see why they like it. It's flinty, mineral, struck match and nutty in aroma. Then it's creamy and fresh and savoury and complex on the palate. It's very classy and grown-up Portuguese white, kind of with a nod to both the past and the future, made from a blend of Rabigato, Codega de Larinho, Viosinho, Donzelino, Arinto, and it just says others on the label. I think, to be honest, they're just making it up, like Daniel said. They're just throwing any old names in the pot.
Please do
it's
send
word
all of that.
salad. Anyway, it's delicious wine.
Great salad.
Yum.
Anyway, one final wine to finish on. The Reynolds Wine Growers, Julian Reynolds Arinto 2018 from the Alentejo. Now, this one's 100% Arinto. Thank the Lord, because then I don't have to say any of these other great names. It's deeply coloured, very generous. It's a heartwarming style, full of waxy, oily apricot, kumquat, red apple aromas, and then with that fleshy, chalky, yeasty palate profile. It's complex and aged, obviously, and intriguing. So characterful and individual. And this is a common theme of these great Portuguese whites. They don't play by the rules. They have to be experienced to be understood and appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the 2007 Antão Vaz from Reynolds was stunning too, wasn't it? So, these wines can age supremely well in all their different styles and guises. We can't recommend exploring and discovering these wines highly enough. They are so worth it. And, as Tiago hinted, they might not be cheap now, but they'll almost certainly be going up in price in the future. So perhaps worth getting some in now before that happens.
Good point, yes. So we're going to wrap things up, but I think you've got a couple of quick-fire tips to throw into the mix before we finish,
yes,
haven't you?
absolutely. Thank you very much. Just a couple more whites we really enjoyed at Vinho da Casa. The Casa de Passarella Villa Oliveira Vinha do Provincio Douro 2012 in Magnum from Paulo Nunes. Also his O Fugitivo Barcelo Branco 2022. And then a couple more whites from Alentejo, both from Tapada do Chaves. They're Branco 2008. I tried the 1985 of this wine last year and it was stunning. Also their Scala Kelly 2021, which is actually Alvarinho from the Alentejo. Who knew? And it's lovely.
So there we go, Heike. Alvarinho isn't just for Vinho Verde. So by way of final summary, Portuguese white wines are well worth discovering. The best are inspired by the country's indigenous varieties and historic styles to create unique, often characterful, frequently quirky wines that have to be tasted to be believed. they can also age superbly. From Vinho Verde to Douro, Douro, Bairrada, Alentejo and beyond, our advice would be to dive in and have some fun.
Maybe just lock up the guitar and microphone before you do so. Thanks to our interviewees, Tiago Mendes and Daniel Niepoort. Thank you also to listeners Heike and Jenna for sending in those excellent questions, which I hope we've managed to answer. We'll put all the wine details, including international availability, on our website show notes.
As ever, please do consider giving us a boost by rating and reviewing the show wherever you're listening. We really do appreciate it. Even better, share it with a couple of like-minded friends. For all this, and of course, for listening, thank you. Until next time, cheers.